The outside view, Kent Sommers from the Arizona Republic. He joins us with a look at this Cardinals team, Kent, who at 2-2, couple of wins, not the most aesthetically pleasing wins, and in their losses, they've had a lot of issues protecting the quarterback right now. When you look at this Cardinals team through the quarter pole of the season, a little bit of a disappointment, a little bit of what you expected. Where did the Cardinals sit through 4?
Well, certainly they're disappointed to be 2-2. They hope to be better, but the story of the season so far are injuries. They lost running back David Johnson and his 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns in the very first game. Their left tackle DJ Humphries played 8 plays in the first game, and he's been out ever since with a sprained knee. Last week they lost their leading pass rusher from a year ago, Marcus Golden, 12.5 sacks. So it's a really banged-up team right now that's just trying to survive until maybe they get some people back and can perform a little better.
Carson Palmer getting up there. He was having a great start to his Cardinals career. Here towards the end, what is the sentiment in Arizona for Carson?
I think people who know football and really study it realize he's still pretty good. He struggled the first half of last season, lost some arm strength. They started budgeting his practice time and had a very good last 8 games. And this year he's been excellent the last 2 weeks. Had a very poor first game, but the last 2 weeks he's been on the money. The problem is he's just getting beat up. He's been sacked 6 times in each of the last 2 games. He was hit 16 times last Sunday by the 49ers, and he's just not going to survive the season if they keep getting pounded like that.
The injuries, as you said, mounted up there for the Cardinals. The Eagles going through it as well. Looks like Smallwood's going to be questionable with the knee, but a lot of people think he won't play. Fletcher Cox is out in this one for Philadelphia. With Fletcher Cox being out, Ron Darby already out as well. Where do you think the Cardinals, they haven't been able to run the ball. So is this a game they lean on Carson Palmer in this one with all the injuries the Eagles have on their defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, they lean on Carson Palmer in the passing game every week now, especially with David Johnson out. And you're right, they haven't been able to run the ball. They're last in the league, 2.7, 2.8 yards a carry. They've had a lot of negative runs, but they need to at least maintain the threat of a run in this game. Maybe not be great at it, but not abandon it like they've had to the last few weeks, because, I think they've got some advantages with their receivers against the Eagles' corners. It's just a matter of getting the ball to a Larry Fitzgerald or a John Brown or a Jaron Brown, and they haven't been able to do that well enough. And that Chris Johnson turned 32 last week. He's showing his age a little bit at running back. Andre Ellington's been very dynamic for them. I think against the Eagles we'll see more of Andre Ellington probably than we have in the first month of the season.
Our outside view takes us to Arizona with Kent Sommers from the Arizona Republic. They'll be in town to take on the Eagles. Countdown to kickoff coverage starts on Sunday at 10 a.m. John and Joe live at McFadden's from the ballpark. How about the loss of Golden on defense? Here we just talked about losing Fletcher Cox, but Fletcher's a guy who plays on the inside. Marcus is a guy who gets you to the quarterback. Losing a guy like that in today's NFL, that's a big loss.
Yeah, it's a very big loss. He didn't have a sack yet this season, but, he was there a lot of times. A lot of pressures. And just a dynamic, emotional player, and the rest of the guys sort of fed off of that. So it's going to be interesting how they replace him. They do have Chandler Jones on the other side, who's been very good this season. Kareem Martin will start in place of Marcus Golden. He's a solid backup who's never really had a chance to start full-time. And they're going to swing Hassan Reddick from Temple University, the 13th overall pick. They're going to move him from inside linebacker and swing him outside. So I think we'll see him in a little bit of the same role where he was so good at Temple, rushing the passer from the outside, playing outside linebacker. So that'll be sort of fun to watch on Sunday.
Kent, when you take a look at one area that the Cardinals think that they can exploit, whether it's offense or defense, where are they excited this week when they look at this Eagles team?
Well, 2 things. I think they always feel like they have an advantage with their receivers against most secondaries, and especially now, John Brown, who's been hobbled, is close to full health. J.J. Nelson, who was limited last week with a hamstring, should be better. Those guys are the the real incredibly fast guys Bruce Arians loves to have at receiver. And Arians loves to throw deep. He'll do it, half a dozen times or so in a game, most games. So I think that's an advantage if they can, maintain protection for Carson Palmer. And, defensively, the Eagles, it's going to be an interesting matchup. The Eagles have been running the ball so well, as you guys know, the last couple of weeks, and the Cardinals have a very good run defense. I mean, they haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher in 17 games. They'll devote all the resources they have to stopping the run. So that'll be an interesting matchup, I think.
And with Smallwood out, it'll be interesting, or potentially out, it'll be interesting to see what happens. He's been kind of playing the Sproles role. Ertz tied for third in the NFL in catches by tight ends. He's been great, but Arizona's been very good against the tight end. So this could come down to maybe an Alshon Jeffrey against a Patrick Peterson. How do they match up with the Eagles receivers on Sunday?
I think that's exactly what they'll do. Peterson on Jeffrey. Peterson's played very well. I think he's had maybe 5 or 6 passes completed on him all season, and that's defending the other team's number one guy. A guy to watch, I think, is number 27 for the Cardinals, safety Tyvon Branch. He's playing as well as any safety in the league. He's done really a nice job against tight ends. Jason Witten of Dallas had 1 catch against the Cardinals. Branch is, a pretty solidly built guy, but can really run. And he's probably been their best defender so far this season.
I think Carson Wentz, you have Carson Palmer, Carson Wentz here in Philadelphia. The numbers don't jump off the page, but what kind of concern does he bring to Arizona's defense?
Yeah, the defensive players have talked a lot this week about how impressed they are with him, and I know the numbers overall seem sort of pedestrian, but there's a lot of respect in Arizona for what he has done, especially on third down, especially in the red zone. Very calm, young quarterback. I know the coaching staff here loved him coming out of college, so they have a ton of respect. It's not like they're going into this game with an arrogance because they're playing a young quarterback. It's just the opposite, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I know Wentz is a guy that keeps plays alive. He runs around. It makes plays. He doesn't, sometimes the deep ball's not there. The accuracy might be off a little bit, but when he's on the run and moving around, that really gets teams on edge. And one thing that he's been able to do is make plays happen. And that seems to be what has not happened with the Arizona offense is when I watched them play Dallas on Monday night a couple of weeks ago, it just seemed that they were just chucking the ball down the field because they have no running game. I mean, is that simply now, last week it looked like they tried to get the ball out of the hand a little quicker, and that was the recipe the Giants used against the Eagles with Eli. Just 1, 2, 3, boom. He got it out in less than 2 seconds. You going to see more of that this week where they just try to get it out real quick? And you mentioned all the playmakers. Let the playmakers make the plays?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they'll do. Chris Johnson caught the ball very well last week. So did Andre Ellington, as I mentioned it. When Ellington's in the backfield, they'll often motion him out or even just line him up in the slot and get matchups there. He had some big plays last week, even though he dropped a couple balls and had a touchdown overturned by replay. But I think that's what they'll do with Palmer. I really do. It'll be sort of maybe that in lieu of trying to pound the ball and run the ball constantly. But also, they're going to take deep shots. Bruce Arians is a guy that doesn't deviate too much from his style of play, and I think it'll be too enticing to see those receivers going downfield. And Carson Palmer throws a really pretty deep ball, so I think we'll see some of that too.
I know the last time I was at the game when the Cardinals came to Philly, I think it was a Sunday night game, and they just blew the doors off the Eagles that night. These two teams are a lot different from then. What is the feel around Arizona like? Does it feel like, man, this is a must-win for us the way this NFC is kind of playing out so far?
I don't know if they feel like it's a must-win or their fans do. Certainly it's important. They've already lost twice to NFC teams, Detroit and Dallas. I think, the Cardinals, I look at it like these next 3 games. They have the Eagles, they have Tampa Bay, and then they go to London to play the Rams. I think they need to win 2 of those 3 games to sort of remain in contention or remain relevant. They would love to win on the road, obviously. And, yeah, that 2015 game, they did blow the Eagles out. But what's interesting, Since that game, the Cardinals are 10, 13, and 1.
Wow.
At the end of that game, toward the end of that game, Tyrann Mathieu blew out his knee. He's better this year, but he still hasn't played up to that level. Carson Palmer hurt his finger in that game. I think it affected him in the playoffs, and who knows, maybe early last year. So since that game, the Cardinals haven't been the same. Part of it is the things that happened in that game. It wasn't other than the win, it wasn't a successful trip for him.
Ken Sommers, the Arizona Republic, has covered the Cardinals for a long time, and, of course, the Eagles and the Cardinals this weekend at the Link. Countdown to kickoff coverage starts at 10 a.m. with John and Joe live from McFadden's at the ballpark. Merrill and Mike with the call at 1. Kent, we appreciate the time, pal. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for having me.